Hey there guys, and welcome to my Unreal Engine tutorial on how to easily set up Mixamo root motion animations to the Unreal Engine 4 mannequin skeleton. First off, let's talk about root motion. I would highly recommend that you guys take a look at the UE4 docs that discuss root motion, and they discuss it incredibly well and explain everything perfectly using videos and images. But basically, root motion is the motion or movement of a character that is driven by the animation itself, instead of a character controller. The root bone specifically is what is actually being animated, and as a result the collision capsule moves or rotates. And I'll be showing you exactly why this is so useful. So I downloaded some of the Mixamo animations. For those of you that haven't seen my previous tutorial on how to re-import them and retarget them, I would highly recommend you take a look at it, as I will not be discussing any retargeting information at all. The only thing I will be saying actually is when you do download them, here's an example, if I just type one here. Ensure that the in-place checkbox here is false. As you can see, the character is moving forward. That is exactly what you want. You do not want any in-place animations, otherwise you will not have any root motion data to play with. And you need to have root motion data, obviously, to have root motion animations. So make sure that this is off. This needs to be false. And then you can do what you have to do with the download settings like I did in the previous video. Right, so let's get started with ground root motion. So as you can see here, this is just your basic running animation, except that he arcs to the right. You can see that this is root motion in a variety of ways. First off, you can see that the starting location compared to the end of the location of the animation is different. You can also go to character, head over to bones, and go to all hierarchy. And you'll see a red line. This is just an indication that the root bone location is changing. You can see he goes all the way there. So, let me just put this, I'll leave that on for now. The settings that you need for root motion to work in Unreal Engine, every single animation sequence needs to have enable root motion checked. That's right here in the root motion section of the animation. Secondly, to further add accuracy to your root motion animation, you're going to want to set the root motion root lock to anim first frame. This just uses the root bone position of the first frame of the animation. And I'll show you why this is important. So if you go down here, you'll see the character is still a little bit floating. Every time you enable root motion, this is what happens. He gets shot up a bit. So what we need to do is we need to enable that, and then we need to set it to anim first frame. And then now he's brought back down to the location he is meant to be. So as you can see here now, the moment you enable root motion, it suddenly feels like it's an in-place animation. This can be quite confusing. So if you would like to see what your root animation is doing, you can always go to character, animation, and process root motion. Once that's checked, it'll be going on a sort of infinite loop where the character will be completing the animation in loops. So he's just continuously running and walking in that direction. But you can see again that the root is changing. Yeah, it kind of loops back. So what I would like to do is go into here and uncheck that. If you would also like to see in terms of like the actual bones and how they move, you can come here to skeleton tree and you click the root, and you'll be able to see in the transform that the root bone is actually moving. You can see here X and Y mainly at the moment. There's no change in the Z axis. This is why this is a ground root motion animation. So you can see, yeah, it moves. And that's how we know that this is definitely, again, confirming for the third time that this is a root motion animation. If I go back to enable root motion, we're now going to go into the next step of enabling root motion for ground root motion animations. So we have to go to the anim blueprint. We have to go to class defaults, which is actually here. And we have to ensure that the root motion mode is set to root motion from everything. This just ensures that the blueprint, the animation blueprint, extracts every bit of root motion data from all animation sequences that have root motion enabled. That's exactly what that does, and it works very well. What I'm going to do now is create a testing scenario, just so you guys can have just much easier to test animations this way, I find, so I'm going to be doing it. You guys can do it if you wish, you don't have to. I'd recommend it. So you get an enter key, And we're going to create an event where if we press a key, it's going to trigger a boolean that is then read into the animation blueprint and then therefore triggers the animation. So this is the basic is testing animation. And then we're going to have a flip-flop that alternates between two different variables. So I'm going to put this here. And I'm going to set it to when we press it once, it's going to go into true. And if I press it again, it's going to go into false, and it repeats. I'm going to go back into my animation blueprint. I am now going to get us some space here. Take the try get point on a node and pull off the reference and cast it to the third person character. Again, this is for testing purposes. This is why I'm not focusing much on neatness. I'm just trying to create a testing scenario so we can easily test out and ensure that all the animations are working correctly. So we're going to get that testing boolean that we just made. We're going to get it, and we are going to promote it to a variable inside the animation blueprint. Is testing animation. So now we have a direct link, or direct reference to the boolean that is in the character blueprint, and it's now connected to a variable that is in the animation blueprint, and it's constantly reading that variable. So if it changes in the third person blueprint, we will know in the third person animation blueprint. So I'm creating a state where it's going to be like a testing state, called testing animation. The transition rule is going to be is testing animation true. So it's going to move from idle to this particular animation if that variable is true. And it's going to go back into idle once testing animation is not true. For those of you that don't know how to actually make nodes straight, you just select them, press Q. It's a glorious tool. I love it. So we've got the transitions working. Now we need to actually place in the animation. Take this, drag and drop it into there. And we're going to keep it on loop, just so you guys can see exactly what it does. And that should be it. So we take the character here. If I press enter, he will now on loop play the root motion animation. This is the animation doing all the work. I'm not touching my keyboard. This is purely the animation doing all the movement for my character. And that is how you do ground root motion animations. So now that we got that working, we are now going to jump into the air root motion animations. So, if we take our rope climb animation, as you can see, it's climbing up. Again, you can tell it's root motion because the character is moving from his original position upwards. It's quite a short animation. What we are going to do is do exactly what we did last time. Enable root motion. We are going to set the the root motion root lock to anim first frame. I'm going to save it, and you're even going to see here, if I just disable that quickly, just so you have an idea of what the animation is, that again, if you look at the transform, it is moving left and right, but more specifically, it is moving upwards. You can see the z-axis change quite a bit. And this is why this particular scenario is a little different to the previous one. So again, setting that all these settings to be true, going to just play the animation and show you what will happen if we don't input the correct things. So, as you can see here, looks all good. Press enter. See, the character is moving left and right. You can even see the capsule moving himself, but you can't actually move up. And that is because of a thing called a movement mode. And the current movement mode is walking. So we have to change this when the animation is played. Why do we have to change that? Well, each movement mode has its own set of physics functions that are responsible for calculating things like velocity, acceleration, and things like that. Which is why it won't work, because things like gravity is being applied to it, the character. So, to stop that, we have to create a animation notify. And that is here. So you go to the animation that you would like, you go to the notify section, you right click and you hit new notify right here. We're going to call this notify, what should we call it? Something that's related to root motion. So go start root motion air. You can name it whatever you'd like. I just feel like this makes sense because it's a root motion that's in the air and it's starting, so we keep it there. Now, be careful not to place it too early. I've noticed that sometimes if you place it too early, it just skips it. So, now that we've created the notifier, we're going to go into the animation blueprint. We're going to go to the event graph, and we are going to start root motion. We're going to find the event. This is the event that we just created in the animation. And we are going to actually change anything from the character, we need a reference to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm actually going to right click on it and promote it to a variable. We're going to call this character. That way we can actually use it in any of our notifiers right here. So we go here, we get character movement, and on the start we are actually going to set movement mode, and we're going to be setting it to flying, because that way nothing like gravity will be applied to it. The character can move up freely without any constraints. So flying it is. Okay, that's definitely, I think that is it for the air root motion. Let's just check it out now. Is it being applied to it? And yes, the character is now moving up perfectly, and it's actually quite a nice animation. And you can see the z-axis is changing, everything is changing. It's moving a little left and right every now and then, and he's climbing up. So the next step is going to be trying to figure out how to do air and ground root motion animations. So here's an example of one. Share idea. This is just one where the character is running up and then jumping into a climb. So as you can see, he is moving in the ground root motion, and at a certain point, his z-axis begins changing. And then again, at a certain point, the z-axis stops. Right there. So we're going to do what we always do. Enable root motion. Make it anim first frame. Save that. I'm going to show you exactly why we need to do what we're going to do again. So run into a climb. That's not the right one. Run into a climb here. Okay, let's see what we have to do. So you see it? He runs up. Of course, the z-axis does not change, but the forward root motion does. So we're going to use what we did last time. We're going to create a notifier. We're using the same one. This is why it's so great to have these notifiers. We're going to go to skeleton notifier, and we're going to start root motion air. That's fantastic. We're going to start it at around when he leaves the ground. Like here probably is a good idea. Okay. That should be it, right? We'll take a look. Here in the air, and we're good. Oh, it's on loop. Let me just actually stop that. Oh, we don't need it to loop. It's easier if it doesn't loop. So we go here, do it again, and bingo, we're there. But as you can see now, we can't do anything. It's fully stuck. If we transition back, we are now essentially moving and flying. Even if I let go of a directional key, he still slides because we are sort of flying. So we need to have an end root motion air. So we have to go here, probably around maybe here is when the root motion needs to end in regards to the z-axis change. So we get a new animation notify. We're going to call this end root motion air. So that way there's a start and there's an end point. So if I go back to the animation blueprint, we go to end root motion air. And it's the same exact thing, except we're not setting it to flying. We are setting it to walking, which is the default land movement mode. So to put a comment around here, this is going to go root motion air. More like InAir, I guess, technically, but yeah. Okay, so we're going to start. I think that's all we need. So if we do this, if I just move the character here onto this white block, because I did prepare for this exact scenario, didn't I? Gonna rotate it like so. And I hit enter. He climbs up and he's finished. And that's exactly what we wanted. So great, we got that done. Now let's move into turn-based animations. Now these are actually quite easy if you have the correct animation. What I mean by that is if you have seen Mixamo animations, there are a lot of animations that unfortunately don't have any rotation data with their turn animations. As you can see here, if you look at the transform, the local rotation is not changing at all. That is an issue, and I'll show you exactly why. If I set this to root motion, so set it to anim first frame as we have been doing this entire time, and then we get that animation in, yeah? It's just an animation called mutant turn right, and it's not a big deal. Put that in. If I rotate just once, I'll turn off looping. Give me an example here. I turn. The actual capsule has not been rotated. Why do I know this? Because if I press enter again and return back to my idle state, he will face the direction that he is originally at, because the animation itself is not turning the character. It is incredibly annoying and disappointing. But unfortunately, Terrible Studios, I did end up contacting them, and they said that they are not going to be fixing this for a while. They're doing other projects and therefore do not have the time to. So I will be showing you an example of what correct root bone rotation would look like using an animation that is actually from another content creator. His name is Metal Design, and I have this animation. It's from one of his series. I think it's called UE4 Climb System. And it's just a ledge climbing system tutorial, which is super awesome. Check it out in the link description below. And why this is a good example is because the actual root bone does rotate. And here's an example of it. So this animation is just a ledge climbing. He rotates around a corner. So if we go here, and you can see the character Z, you can see here, it starts turning. It starts rotating the character. And that successfully rotates the character. And I'll show you why it's so good for us. Once I change the settings back to what it's supposed to be, the root motion, enable it, anim first frame, go here, drop that into the animation blueprint, drag that drop there, and when we use it, right here, does that. Oh, it's looping. Apologies, it is not meant to loop. I thought I changed that. So go here, loops, and then hit enter again, and now the character is facing the correct direction that he just rotated to, because it rotated the root bone, not just the mesh. And now we're here. Yeah, and that is how you set up root motion using Mixamo animations under several different scenarios. Thank you very much, guys. I hope this was useful, and good luck and have fun.